What up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News. Happy New Year's to all the boxing fans out there, all the casuals, all the diehards, all the people that are just learning about boxing. Happy New Year's to all. Um, the topic of this morning, man. I was just reading the statement that Manny Pacquiao has issued, and he's willing to fight Terrance Crowford in April, but for $20 million. And you know, and I think about that. I think about his statement and his request rather to Bob Arum. Someone that he's been loyal with for the last 15 years or so. And I agree with it. I think that Manny Pacquiao, him of all people, is deserving of $20 million. You can't go from $150 million to then $4 million. You know what I mean? I think that was I think that's actually insulting, being all the money that Manny Pacquiao has made Bob Arum, and he's only allowed $4 million out of that fight purse. I think that fight he should have got paid a lot more, at least 10 to 15 million. Because if you look at what Cotto's getting for fighting Kirkland and what Canelo is getting for fighting Chavez Jr., and even Chavez Jr., those guys are getting paid a lot more than Manny Pacquiao got in his last fight. So $20 million is reasonable, and if you can remember, guys, those that don't know, the Manny Pacquiao, he made $20 million a fight anyway, $20 to $25 million a fight, and that's before the Mayweather fight. Okay, so yes, that's really the normal status quo of what his normal pension is for fighting fighters, being Manny Pacquiao. He's the WBO champion now at 147 pounds at welterweight. So, yes, he deserves that type of money. Fighting an undefeated fighter is in Terrance Crowford. And I don't honestly think that Manny Pacquiao can beat Terrance Crowford. If he can beat Terrance Crawford, that shows a lot coming from Manny Pacquiao. But honestly, I think he's asking for $20 million now is because he figures that he's going to get beat. So why not get paid? He's looking for a good payout before he gets, I don't think Manny Pacquiao should fight anymore. I'm totally against fighters past the age of 37, 38 years old going back in the ring. I wouldn't recommend it for Manny. I wouldn't recommend it for Floyd. I sure wouldn't recommend it for guys like way past their prime, like Hopkins and Jones and Mosley and all these guys that decided to try to come back or try to stay around the sport of boxing, and fight on the mainstream. Spar, train, promote, don't fight. Stop trying to fight these guys that that it's their time to shine. Stop being greedy. You're just going to get yourself hurt. But Manny Pacquiao, he needs to follow the same plan, but he looked decent against Jesse Vargas. But you remember, he's fighting Jesse Vargas. And taking nothing away from Jesse Vargas is a good fighter. He only had one loss, and that was to Timothy Bradley. But that fight was, it was what it was. It was a lack of communication from the referee into the fighter. He did have Timothy Bradley hurt. However, Jesse Vargas, he did upset Saddam Ali. He did do that. However, you're moving way up in class from Saddam Ali to Manny Pacquiao. Okay? So, again, Jesse Vargas was a young, strong, hungry guy. However, he was still able to get that right and land at the right at times against Pacquiao, which I feel that he wouldn't have been able to do a few years ago. And I think Manny Pacquiao would have knocked him out. I feel he would have knocked him out, a few years back. But Jesse Vargas is no Terrance Crowford. Terrance Crawford is a guy that has the reach, that has the height. Depending on where they'll fight, if Bob Arum agrees to it, which if he doesn't agree to it, that's just an indication that Manny Pacquiao should have been a free agent a long time ago. Because if Bob Arum tries to deny that claim for Manny Pacquiao to receive that $20 million, that only just proves that my point, So, because but I don't think that Manny Pacquiao will even beat Terrance Crawford since he is willing to fight Terrance Crawford. I normally don't really cover the fight, cover this fight because it hasn't happened. But now the talks have talked about Terrance Crawford is going to fight anyone that Bob Arum puts in front of him. And he's going to do the best of his ability because he's a God-gifted fighter. Again, I would watch it. It'll be entertaining, but I think Terrance Crawford will eventually stop Manny Pacquiao. I believe that because Manny Pacquiao, he has the speed, the power, not so much. I don't know at 140. But again, they might fight at 147 because Freddie Roach is going to want an edge. And he's going to want Terrance Crawford to come up to 147. But Manny Pacquiao stated he'll come down to 135 to fight Lomachenko, but not at 140 for Terrance Crawford. But those are strategies in the game, you know what I mean? Those are those angles that, trainers and promoters use to give the fighter an edge. So don't be surprised if it's at 147 also, or a catch weight at 144 or whatever. That would be the case. However, again, I would like to see it. I would like to see that fight. If Terrance Crawford, though, he does change the southpaw, I wouldn't recommend him changing the southpaw against Manny Pacquiao. But I think he'll do whatever comes normal and natural. Whatever will work. And I don't see him being a southpaw fighting Manny Pacquiao. That's the wrong idea. Now, if he tries something like that, Manny Pacquiao can capitalize on it. Because he still has that speed again. But it is Manny Pacquiao. But I don't really think at this time of his career. Now, a prime Manny Pacquiao, that's a totally different story. I'm not talking about that. I'm being realistic. I'm not talking about what he could do when he was what he was. I'm talking about what he is right now. And what he is right now is an aging fighter. He's an aged fighter. A lot of people think he aged like vinegar. I think he aged like wine. But nonetheless, he's still aging. And when you age, you lose things. You lose punching power. They say it's the last to go. I don't know. But all of it's leaving. Testosterone is leaving. Your natural testosterone levels. Your speed is leaving. Your reflexes are dimming. They're getting dull. So, yeah, it is what it is. I think that Manny should get the $20 million. I think he should fight Terrance Crawford. And Terrance Crawford will eventually beat him. That's my prediction on it. I think that would happen if they fought. I would hate to see it, but then again, I would hate to see Manny fight again. Let Terrance Crawford fight someone his own age. You know what I mean? But hey, but again, if Freddie Roach, if the fight even happens, okay, if Freddie Roach makes Terrance Crawford come up to 147 and he beats him, which I predict him to do, that does open the door and opportunity for Terrance Crawford to not only be a superstar, but him to be a champion at 147. So not only if he's the 140-pound champion, if they agree to fight at that weight, which Roach did mention him going back to 140 after the Mayweather fight. However, they didn't anticipate Terrance Crawford being at 140 still, probably, So don't be surprised if it's at 147. But if Terrance Crawford can beat Manny Pacquiao at 147, which that's a whole different question because 147 is an uncharted weight for Terrance Crawford. Will he be able to move? Will he have the punching power at that weight? Will he be able to do the things physically at that weight? What's Terrance Crawford's walking around weight now? What is it? Those are questions to ask when you're getting in that ring. But Terrance Crawford is still young. He's still hungry. And if he beats Manny Pacquiao, he'll be a WBO champion, so he could start fighting all those guys that ran from him, like Danny Garcia at the 140-pound division, and or Thurman, if Thurman, beats Garcia, or if Garcia beats Thurman. Those fights can happen. Those fights will be on the table. The Earl Spence fight will be on the table. All these fights will be on the table. So it might just manifest Terrance Crawford to do something that he was going to do anyway, just a little quicker. And I don't think Terrance Crawford needs to sit at 140 because there's no one at 140 to fight. I think he needs to come up anyway. So that's my take on it, man. Please leave your comments, concerns down below. Check out my Facebook page, Counterpunch Boxing News. And there's a lot of fun stuff on there. I got a lot of pictures and a lot of video footage, of actual fights. Whereas these are just commentary, you know what I mean? But it's some fun stuff. But anyway, this is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and you've been counterpunched. Peace.